So the outline of my talk is very simple. I will first start with the motivations about why should we need domain decomposition in our applications. Then I will review some theory about OSWR methods. I will show applications that Paul-Marie did during his PhD thesis. And then I will present briefly the SEMRAX project called Schwarz for Trio CFD, where we want to apply this kind of methods for fluid flows. So the very first motivation when I started working with Caroline was that at that time we were studying the possible storage, underground storage of nuclear wastes. Well, you may know that France has a number of nuclear power plants, and that after some time the nuclear fuel is taken out of the nuclear power plant and is reprocessed in the plant in La Hague by Areva. But still, after being reprocessed, we have eventually some waste that we don't know what to do with. And one possibility that is considered is to store them in the deep underground. So there is already an experimental laboratory for that in the east of France. And this is a view, very schematic view of the facility. So here is the main zone where the waste could be stored. So you have here a zoom on that little part here, and what you see here is zoomed again to be shown here. And that's where these cells are where the waste canisters are stored. So you have a number of these waste canisters here, put all together, and you have a clay plug here to avoid escape of the radionuclide waste. And all this is put around 500 meters deep in the underground. The whole, so the typical scale length here is 1 kilometer, let's say, and the smallest scale in length is around 1 meter. So you have very different scales in length. And the objective for us was to study the evolution of radionuclide migration in the geosphere. So at time t equals 0, the waste are put here, and we want to see how the radionuclide migrate in the underground and when they reach the surface. Well, you have full details of the project on that website. The modelization of the problem, well, is a convection diffusion equation that is a model for transport in porous media. Here, omega is the porosity of the rock, K is the diffusion of the material, and B is the Darcy flow that is computed, pre-computed, let's say, and that's the flow of the water which will transport the radionuclide in the biosphere. The main characteristic of this equation is that due to the different properties in the geological layers, they are highly heterogeneous. So you can have factors up to, let's say, 100 between different layers in the diffusion matrix. For example, diffusion matrix, one of the difficulties is that it can also be highly anisotropic. But okay, we have different space scales. We also have different time scales because, as I told you, there could be jumps in this coefficient. And so if a medium is less diffused than another, you would like to, well, the typical timescales are higher than when it's more diffusive. And so what we would like to do eventually is to be able to have different layers discretized with different space, mesh scales and with different time steps. One other point is that the whole computation is very demanding in terms of CPU and of memory because it's a large-scale computation. And so we wanted to apply the domain decomposition methods, but domain decomposition methods which allow to have different time steps in the different layers. The second application we have in mind, so this one is not started at all. We are starting it actually here at the SEMRAX, is that you have here a nuclear core, the core of a nuclear reactor. And so you have fluid flows everywhere. The blue color represents water, typically. And so there's water flow everywhere. And my colleagues compute with different models according to the zone, but they compute the water flow in this region. And I'm particularly interested in the incompressible flow that is around here. Much more details will be given by Mathieu, by my colleague Mathieu. He will be talking next week here. So if you're interested in this type of application, just go and watch his talk. And so one of the basic models is the incompressible Navier-Stokes equation that reads like this. So U is the velocity of the flow, P is the pressure. The incompressibility condition is simply, this is the incompressibility condition. And my colleagues do very long transient simulations with up to 1 billion of knowns. And so the need for parallelization and for speedup is quite high. So now I will review some theory of OSWR method. So you probably all are used to space domain decomposition. So here I have a XY domain which I split it into two subdomains. And you know domain decomposition. You make a computation here. You transmit some boundary information to the neighbor here. The neighbor does its computation and transmits back information to the domain on the left and so on. But this is space domain decomposition. And when you have a time domain problem, so now this coordinate is time, the basic idea is that at each time step, you will do a space domain decomposition. So you solve stationary problems in the subdomains at each time iteration. You exchange information through the interface. One of the drawbacks of this method is that it's very difficult to use different time steps in the different subdomains because you need to be synchronized at each time step to be able to exchange information through the space boundary. Well, on the other hand, space-time domain decomposition method consider the interface as the whole, now space and time interface between the two subdomains. And the idea is that you will compute from 0 to your end computational time in the subdomains independently. So you do a computation in the left domain from 0 to t. You do a computation in the right subdomain from 0 to t, and then only at the end of the time simulation, you exchange interface through the space-time interface. And possibly at the price of some projections between the time grids, you can use different time grids on the left and on the right. When you transfer information from the left to the right, you may project the information you have on the left time grid to the right time grid, but this is possible to use different discretizations. well, in space, but what was our interest here is mainly in time. You are able to use local time stepping on the left and on the right. Okay, and one possibility is not to do the whole computation from 0 to the final time, but to decompose the simulation in what we call time windows. So T1 is not a one-time step. You can have here several hundreds of time steps between 0 and T1. The advantage of this is that in practice, this enables you to perform fewer iterations per window than if you do it from 0 to big T. You could also think that after some T1, you may want to use different space grids at the price, again, of some projections between the grids. But if for example, your a posteriori error estimations tells you that it's not necessary anymore to have a very fine space grid here, you could change it, and then at the price of some projection, you could then go on from T1 to T2 and so on. The other advantage is that you can use the solution at T1 to have a good initial guess from T1 to T2 on the space-time boundary, on the interface. Now some theory about that. How does it work? Well, imagine take here the example of the heat equation with possibly discontinuous coefficient here. Nu can be nu1 in omega1 and nu2 in omega2. Then if your monodomain equation is this one, then it's easily shown that the restriction of u to omega1 and to omega2 will simply solve exactly the same equation in omega I cross 0t with, as a right-hand side, the restriction of f in omega I, and that you have physical transmission conditions on the interface. The interface is denoted this way. So you have the continuity of your unknown. For example, if U is a temperature, you have, of course, continuity of the temperature from one subdomain to the other, and the heat flux will be also continuous. So you have these two continuity conditions. Then these conditions can be transformed into an equivalent form, well, provided here alpha 1 plus alpha 2 is different from 0. You can combine these two. For example, I take alpha times alpha 1 times this one, and I add this equality. So this gives me alpha 1 u1 plus this quantity equal alpha 1 u2 plus the other quantity, which was equal to this one. I do the same with alpha 2. But I reverse the n12 into n21. So this one is seen as a boundary condition in omega 1, and this one is seen as a boundary condition for u2 in omega 2. And if you sum this and this, you see that this term disappears because n12 is equal to minus n21. Same thing if you sum this, and so from this, you get that alpha 1 plus alpha 2 u1 is equal to alpha 1 plus alpha 2 u2. And then, provided you have this condition, u1 is equal to u2. And then, once u1 is equal to u2, from this one, you obtain that this one is equal to this one. So they are equivalent under this condition. And then, well, but this is, of course, a coupled problem, because you have seen that U1 depends through the boundary conditions on U2, and U2 depends through the boundary conditions on U1. So this is a coupled problem that can be solved through iteration. So at iteration k, you solve, well, your PDE in the domain, and on the interface, for omega, in omega 1, you have boundary conditions on U1 that depend at iteration k on what you had from the previous, so from the k minus 1 computation in omega 2. And the reverse for U2, the boundary conditions at step k depend on what you had in omega 1 at step k minus 1. Of course, for this, you need initial guesses, U10 and U20 on the space-time interface. The requirement for this process to be well posed is that in each subdomain, your problem has to be well posed. Here, for the heat equation, it's very easy to see that these Robin boundary conditions, as soon as alpha 1 and 2 are strictly positive, that these problems are well posed. It's quite easy to show it. Now, does this iterative process converge? Well, it can be proved through energy estimates that this is the case. Well, it's now a quite standard proof for the heat equation. You perform energy estimates on each subdomain for each iteration, and then you sum up through the iterations and through the subdomains, and the terms on the boundaries, you use these relations to cancel them, and then you end up with something that tells you that the error between the monodomain solution and your subdomain solutions tend to 0. In practice, the convergence speed heavily depends on the value of the parameters alpha 1 and alpha 2, and I'm going to try to show you how you can do to estimate correct values of these parameters. So the idea first is to work at the PDE level, because in practice, everything depends on your numerical scheme, but you don't want to do the analysis each time that you change your numerical scheme. So we work at the PDE level, and we consider some idealized geometrical configuration in which you will be able to do some analytical solutions, well, to find analytical solution for the errors between the solution in your subdomain at step k minus the restriction of your monodomain solution. You will find a relation through the boundary conditions that links the error at step k with the errors at step k minus 1, and you will choose the parameters that minimize, well, this relation will prove to be a geometrical series, and then you will try to minimize the reason of this geometrical series so that you tend as fast as possible to 0. So the ideal geometrical configuration will be the following. You consider two half planes. So omega 1 will be minus infinity times 0 in x, and the whole r in y. You take omega 2 equal to the other half plane, so 0 plus infinity in x and r in y. And then you use a space-time Fourier transform in this y direction and in the time direction on your PDE, so that in the end, for each mode, for each Fourier mode, you obtain a problem that is only one-dimensional in the x direction. And you obtain, since everything is linear, you obtain a second-order ODE, which I wrote here, for the error being this quantity. So by linearity of the PDE, you obtain the same equation for the error as for your unknown, but with the right-hand side, which is 0, because you do f minus f. And the boundary conditions are simply the same as I wrote before, but you just replace U1 by the error in subdomain 1 and U2 by the error in subdomain 2. And so the PDE now, you see here that I transform d over dt by I times omega, and d over dx, or d over dy, sorry, or d2 over dy by minus ky squared. And so this is a simple ODE in the x direction for EIK. And so I'm able to solve it. This is an exponential. Well, you have the sum of two contributions, one exponential with sorry, maybe it's the, yeah, well, okay, it's this slide. So this is a simple ODE. You have, the solution is a simple exponential. You have two modes. You have one which decays at -infinity, so that's the one we keep. And you have one that explodes at -infinity, so we delete this one and the reverse for omega 2. And so we have a simple expression of the error, which depends only on one parameter, and it's an exponential with lambda being the square root of this quantity. And then once you get the analytical expression of the errors at state k, you just put them, well, sorry, there's probably a -1 here and a -1 here and a -1 here. You just plug them into the boundary conditions, and this gives you a relationship between AK here and BK -1 and BK and AK -1. And the relationship depends on your Robin parameters, and so by eliminating BK, you have that AK verifies for each mode, so for each W and KY. AK is simply verifies a geometrical series, and the reason of the geometrical series is this parameter that we call the convergence factor. So for each mode, okay, omega KY, you have this convergence factor. And so each mode, and the dependency on omega KY is through lambda here. So if you consider each Fourier mode, the error in this Fourier mode will decay with this reason. So after a few iterations, the mode which will dominate the error is the mode for which this quantity is the largest. And so the idea is, in order to have the fastest convergence, as fast as possible, is to minimize over alpha 1 and alpha 2 the worst case mode, so the mode for which this quantity is the largest. So we consider the max over omega and ky of the convergence factor, and we try to minimize it with respect to alpha 1, alpha 2. So this is done numerically by a process. If you use MATLAB, you can use fmin search, the function fmin search, which will try to find the minimum of this function. Well, what I have to say here is that the max here is taken over a limited range of omega and ky. These are the ranges that are attainable by the largest and smallest possible ones on your given space grid and time grids. Okay, so this is how a general idea of how you choose your parameters alpha 1, alpha 2. So now I turn to the application part. So this is a test case which was performed by Paul Marie during his PhD thesis. So we had a European project called PAMINA about the assessment of numerical methods for safety computations of underground waste repositories. So here you have, let's say, a slice of a very small slice of the domain I showed in the introduction. You have 10 meters wide and 100 meters high domain. And here in the very center, you have a small subdomain where you have here the waste and here a damaged zone. Because when you dig, well, you take out the clay and then you put the waste and then you put back the clay, but this zone is more permeable than the rest of the clay because it has been processed and it's more permeable than the rest. So we have here the coefficients of the different layers that we have. We have one layer of waste, one layer of damaged zones, and one layer of clay here. So these are the coefficients. You see that the damage zone and the waste are more permeable and more diffusive than the rest. And so the important, if you think about the equation, the important ratio is the ratio of nu over omega, and it's 10 times larger in the damage zone and waste zone than in the clay. So from the physical point of view, you would like to have time steps which will be typically 10 times larger, where typically nothing happens because it's it's much less diffusive than in the other zone. So we tried to make computations with different time steps in the different zones. That's the mesh that was used by Paul-Marie. You see that we have a non-conforming mesh. He used a finite volume method for the discretization in space that was able to handle non-conforming meshes. So we used larger meshes in the zone which is less diffusive, and smaller triangles in the zone where it was more diffusive. So this is well, these are plots of what's happening after some years and then after some centuries. What you see is that the waste. Well, we start with one. This is the concentration of the radionuclides. So we start with 1 in the waste zone, 0 everywhere else, and then you see that quite fast the waste will fill the damage zone and then start to diffuse slowly in the clay zone. So this is a zoom on the waste and damage zone, just to show you that there was a small, but we can see it, a small convection to the top of the domain. Here we plot convergence to monodomain. So we had a monodomain reference solution, and here you see with 1 Robin parameter. So we take the same alpha on the left and on the right, and we optimized. We had convergence up to 10 to the minus 14 in 25 iterations. When you take alpha 1 different from alpha 2 and you optimize, of course you go faster because you have 2 coefficients that you can optimize. And so the monodomain solution is obtained up to numerical precision within 15 iterations. But of course, in practice, as Martin told you yesterday, probably you will not want to reach the full convergence. Probably it's better to stop around this iteration, because anyway your error is dominated by your space discretization. So you see that after already, let's say 5 iterations, you're done. One interesting thing that Paul-Marie did was, as I told you, to try to have different time steps in the different zones. And so the experiment he did was to compute a very, let's say, a monodomain reference solution computed with a very, very fine time step everywhere, and to see the effect of coarsening the time step in the clay region. Because this is useful, because the clay region is, let's say, 99% of your whole domain. And if you use the same time step in both regions, then your computation will be quite slow. But if you can use larger time steps in the large region, then you will be much faster. So what he did was to use different combinations of coarse time steps that are given here, and of fine time steps, so 1/5 of these time steps, in the waste and in the clay. So the reference one is when you have fine time steps everywhere. So this is this line. So you converge with an order 1. This is the order 1 slope. So you converge with the order 1 to the reference computation. And what you see, well, maybe you don't see it, but there are two curves which are almost on the same line. It's when you use fine time steps everywhere, and when you use fine time step where you need fine time steps, that is in the waste zone, and you use coarser time steps in the clay where you don't need fine time steps. So these two curves are almost on the same line. So what this means is that you do not lose any accuracy to use coarser time steps where you don't need fine time steps. And so this is really an illustration of the fact that being able to use two different time steps in different subregions is very useful, because your time to solution is divided by 5, simply because you used a larger time steps where you need a larger time steps. And the other two curves are also one on the other. It's when you use coarse time steps everywhere, and when you use fine time steps in the waste, and fine time steps in the clay and coarse time steps in the waste. This means that it's not useful at all to use fine time steps where you don't need them. This was the expected result, but we wanted to check it. Okay, so this is what I had to present from the numerical results of Paul-Marie. Now I turn to the objective of the Schwartz for Trio CFD SEMREX project that the CA proposes here, this year. So this is in the context, as I told you, of a numerical simulation of possibly turbulent but incompressible flows in nuclear reactor cores. Up to now, we have an open source C++ code, which is called Trio CFD, which solves the incompressible Navier-Stokes equations with turbulence modeling. The numerical scheme is based on a finite volume element process. Well, in a rough way, you can say that it's almost equivalent to finite element schemes. One of the schemes that is implemented in the Trio CFD code is quite close, for those who know it, to the Kruser-Aviar finite element scheme. So our aim here in this project is to study this finite element scheme and well, to try to have a implementation of the OSWR process for this method within the code. Up to now, the time integration scheme is what we call a projection method. This is a method which decouples velocity and pressure updates. So you first do a velocity update from the momentum equation, and then you correct the velocity update through resolution of the pressure Poisson equation. So this decoupling enables you to have, on the one hand, Poisson, vector Poisson equation for the velocity unknowns, and one scalar Poisson equation for the pressure. And up to now, the only parallelization strategy is that, well, when they use iterative procedure like conjugate gradient or GMRes, you need to perform matrix vector products, and these vector dot products, and these are computed in parallel. That's the only parallelization strategy that I have up to now. And so the aim of the project is to start thinking about OSWR strategy for the Navier-Stokes equations. So we first start with the simple Stokes equation. And as I told you, one of the main first steps is to have Robin boundary conditions within the subdomains. So one of the first aim is to have an implementation of the Robin boundary conditions in this code. Then we have to derive the convergence factor in the ideal two-domain case to try to optimize the Robin parameters. And then the third step, if everything goes well, is to start implementing a Schwartz algorithm and to compare well, what happens with the theoretical based Robin parameters and with the actual one that we can choose in the code, and to have a performance assessment of this method. So this is it. Thank you very much.